On the morning of November 25, 2010, a thin layer of fog clung stubbornly to the gray hills of Yangcheng County in Shanxi Province. In coal towns like this, mornings arrive quietly. The air smells faintly of damp soil and burned fuel. The mountains loom without color. Even sound seems muted, as if absorbed by layers of dust that have settled there for decades. At a small local police station, a man walked in and reported that his wife had been missing. He did not rush through the door. He did not appear frantic. According to officers later recalling the moment, he spoke in a low, almost drained voice. His wife, he said, had not been reachable for 11 days. 11 days. In missing person cases, time is not just a detail. It is gravity. The first hours are oxygen. The first night is critical. 11 days is something else entirely. It is long enough for phone batteries to die, long enough for weather to erase footprints, long enough for routines to collapse into silence. Her name was Kui Maya. She was 49 years old. She worked at a small snack restaurant in Jian Town, about 30 kilometers from her home village. She and her husband did not live together full-time. She stayed near work. He remained in their rural village, struggling with chronic liver illness. She was the one earning money. She was the one traveling between two lives. According to him, she left work on the evening of November 14th and never returned. Her phone stopped responding that same night. At first, he assumed she was busy. Then he assumed she was angry. Then he told himself she would call when she was ready. But she never did. When investigators reviewed her phone records, they found something subtle but unsettling. On the evening she disappeared, her phone received 2 consecutive calls just before 8 p.m. The device remained active for a short period afterward. Then the signal vanished. No final message, no distress call, no explanation. Officers retraced her last confirmed movements. At approximately 9 p.m. that night, a motorcycle taxi driver remembered picking up a middle-aged woman wearing a bright red scarf. The details stood out to him because the color was so sharp against the winter landscape. Red against gray rock, red against black road, red against a sky already drained of light. She asked to be dropped off at a fork in the road on the outskirts of town. It was an unusual request. The intersection was poorly lit. There were no open shops nearby, no houses immediately visible, just 2 diverging roads cutting into darkness. One leading toward Fenghuang village several kilometers away, the other toward an old coal mining area less than a kilometer's walk. The driver recalled that she stepped off the motorcycle without hesitation. She paid. She did not look back. And then she walked toward the dark. From that moment on, there are no confirmed sightings of her alive. Standing at that fork today, it would not strike you as dramatic. It is just another rural crossroad. Cracked pavement, wind moving through dry brush, distant outlines of mining structures. But at night, in mid-November, when temperatures fall and fog thickens along the ground, the place feels suspended. Sound carries strangely. Visibility shortens. Headlights appear and disappear like signals from another world. Investigators asked a simple question: why get off there? If she intended to return to her rented room in town, there were easier routes. If she planned to visit someone, why not be dropped directly at their door? The red scarf became the last clear image anyone could hold on to. As detectives widened their inquiry, they visited the restaurant where she worked. The owner stated she had completed her shift around 9 p.m. Nothing unusual, no visible argument, no signs of distress. But another detail emerged. She did not actually sleep above the restaurant, as some family members believed. After closing, she typically left. Where she went after 8 p.m. most nights was unclear. In coal regions like Yangcheng, migration between identities is common. Workers come and go. People maintain separate addresses. Relationships form quietly, away from villages where reputations linger. But disappearances, true disappearances, are rarer. And the 11-day delay hung over the case like fog over the mountains. Why wait? Was it denial, fear, or certainty that she would return? When officers revisited the fork in the road days later, the environment offered nothing. No scarf, no dropped belongings, no tire tracks preserved in dirt, just wine moving across open land. Yet something about the intersection unsettled them. The geography forced a choice. Left toward the village, right toward the mine. One direction suggested familiarity and community. The others suggested isolation, abandoned buildings, worker dormitories, unused structures facing demolition. If this were voluntary, it required intention. If it were not, it required opportunity. And somewhere between those two roads, on a cold November night, Quimaya vanished. By the time the report was officially filed, whatever had happened had already unfolded in silence. Whatever decision had been made, by her or by someone else, had already set events in motion. In the early stage of a missing persons investigation, detectives often ask not who did this, but who was closest. Because when someone disappears without a trace, the truth rarely lies in open fields. It usually lies within the circle of people who knew them best. And in Quimai's life, that circle was more complicated than it first appeared. The red scarf was the last thing anyone saw, but it would not remain the only clue for long. Before investigators could understand how Quimaya disappeared, they needed to understand how she lived. On paper, her life was not unusual for rural Shanxi in 2010. She was 49 years old, married, a mother, the primary financial provider in a household shaped by illness and limited opportunity. Her husband's chronic liver condition kept him from stable work. Medical bills were not dramatic enough to make headlines, but persistent enough to reshape daily life. So she left the village. Jayan Town offered something the village could not: cash income. She worked long hours at a small snack restaurant. Early mornings, late evenings, repetitive tasks, steady pay. The owner provided meals and a place to stay. To outsiders, this looked like sacrifice, responsibility, practical survival. But surface appearances in small towns can be misleading. When detectives began reviewing her phone records, they did not see the communication pattern of a woman living a narrow life between work and home. They saw density, repetition, emotional persistence. There were clusters of calls, sometimes 3 or 4 to the same number within a short window. Missed calls returned immediately. Conversations stretching late into the night, then silence for days, then sudden contact again. Most of those numbers belonged to men. One name surfaced quickly: a 29-year-old man who admitted to living with her in town. He was significantly younger, unemployed or inconsistently employed, financially unstable. When questioned, he did not deny the relationship. In fact, he described it with a kind of blunt neutrality. Yes, they shared a rented room. Yes, she paid most expenses. Yes, she had a husband in the village. He claimed there was no conflict before she disappeared. On November 14th, he said, she told him she would return briefly to her home village and come back the next day to collect her wages. They planned to celebrate his birthday soon. It sounded ordinary, almost domestic. But domestic arrangements built on imbalance often carry invisible tension. She was older. She earned money. She controlled logistics. According to acquaintances, she did not tolerate being ignored. If she called and someone did not answer, she called again and again. Her phone logs supported this. There was urgency in the pattern, not panic, but insistence. Control in small doses can feel like stability. In larger doses, it can feel like pressure. The younger partner's room showed no immediate signs of violence, no disturbance, no visible trace. But what stood out was not evidence of conflict. It was the absence of a clear alibi for the later hours of that night. After 9 p.m., his movements blurred into vague statements about staying inside. Still, something about his demeanor suggested dependency rather than dominance. Investigators noted it, but did not yet conclude anything. Another number appeared repeatedly in the call records. A local man who had once been involved with her in a multi-level marketing venture that failed. Money had been lost. There were lingering financial disputes. She had reportedly called him demanding repayment. Financial motive is often the most straightforward line in homicide cases. Detectives pursued it quickly, but this lead weakened under scrutiny. Witness accounts placed him in his home village that night. No travel, no suspicious activity. The anger may have existed, but proximity did not. Then there was a third figure, more established, more stable, a mine manager. He had once helped her family secure work when a nearby coal operation was still active. In communities like Yangcheng, that kind of assistance creates loyalty, gratitude, sometimes obligation. Their communication history was less frequent than the younger man's. but deeper. Calls at irregular hours, periods of silence followed by renewed contact. Not chaotic, intentional. Detectives could not yet see the emotional architecture, but they could sense it. Qui Mei was not simply balancing two men, she was navigating roles. In her village, she was the decisive wife who handled finances and pressured her husband to contribute more. Some neighbors described her as strong, others described her as sharp-tongued. She did not accept stagnation easily. Poverty to her seemed like something to fight against rather than endure. In town, she was industrious and disciplined at work. In private, she was emotionally entangled in relationships that crossed age, status, and dependency lines. What emerges in cases like this is rarely chaos. It is layering, layered obligations, layered expectations, layered emotional debts, and layered secrets. On the evening of November 14th, shortly before her phone signal disappeared, she received 2 consecutive calls. Investigators later determined those calls did not come from her younger partner. They came from another man. That detail shifted the emotional center of the case. Because when someone lives multiple lives, the greatest risk does not always come from the most obvious attachment. Sometimes it comes from the person who feels replaced, or exposed, or dismissed. Qui Mei's world was not falling apart publicly. There were no reported threats, no police complaints, no visible escalation. But the phone records told a different story, one of emotional intensity contained within private conversations. Investigators began to ask a quiet but critical question. Was she trying to leave one of those lives behind? And if so, who stood to lose the most? At this stage, there was still no confirmed crime scene. No body, no formal suspect, only a red scarf disappearing into fog, and a woman whose life was far more complicated than anyone initially understood. When a disappearance begins to feel less like absence and more like concealment, investigators stop asking where the person went and start asking who last saw them. By the end of the first week of inquiry, Qui Mei's case had quietly shifted from missing person to potential criminal investigation. There was no public announcement, no press conference, just a narrowing of focus inside a small police station in Yangcheng County. The first circle of suspicion formed around the 29-year-old man who shared her rented room. He was young, financially unstable, and dependent on her income. In cases involving emotional imbalance, dependency can turn volatile when threatened. Detectives pressed him on the timeline. He maintained that she left work on the evening of November 14th and told him she would briefly return to her home village. He claimed he stayed in town that night. No argument, no visible tension. He described her mood as normal, but normal is a subjective word. There were no witnesses who could confirm his presence indoors after 9:01 p.m. No electronic records placing him elsewhere, just his statement. Still, something about his posture during questioning suggested passivity rather than aggression. He did not attempt to redirect blame. He did not over-explain. He seemed more confused than defensive. Investigators moved outward. The man connected to the failed financial scheme was re-examined. Their phone history showed repeated disputes about money. Financial arguments can escalate quickly, particularly when one party feels cornered. But again, logistics weakened the theory. Witnesses placed him in his home village that night. Travel distance, terrain, and timing made involvement unlikely. Motive alone was not enough. Then came a more subtle lead, a man whose number had appeared only occasionally in the call records, but critically twice in quick succession, shortly before her phone signal went dark. He lived locally. He worked odd jobs. On the evening of November 14th, he claimed he had invited Qui Mei to join a small mahjong game because they were short one player. She agreed to come after her shift, but she never arrived. According to his statement, he called her twice near 8 p.m. to confirm. She answered the first call briefly, said she was still working. The second call went unanswered. The group eventually dispersed. At first glance, his story fit the phone log, but during a follow-up interview, he added something that altered the trajectory of the investigation. Around 9 p.m. that night, he said, he was walking near a street not far from the restaurant when he saw her across the road. She was wearing a red scarf, and she was not alone. He described a motorcycle moving slowly beside her. The rider's face was unclear in the darkness. The engine idled rather than accelerated. It was not a hurried exchange. It looked like a conversation. He remembered this clearly because she paused mid-step before mounting the back seat. She did not appear distressed. She did not appear forced. She climbed on, and the motorcycle turned toward the darker edge of town. That was the last confirmed sighting of Kui Mai alive. This detail reframed everything. Until that moment, the fork in the road where the motorcycle taxi driver dropped her off was considered her final known location. But now investigators had a new possibility. Perhaps she never intended to walk alone into the dark. Perhaps she was meeting someone. The motorcycle rider became the focal unknown. Yangcheng County was not large, but it was not small enough to easily track one motorcycle among hundreds. Coal towns rely heavily on them. Workers ride them. Managers ride them. Visitors pass through on them. Detectives began the slow work of cross-checking. Who owned motorcycles matching the witness description? Who had contact with Kui Mai that evening? Who had no solid alibi after 9 p.m.? And one pattern began to tighten. The calls at 8 p.m., the sighting at 9 p.m., the fork in the road near the old coal mine. Each thread pointed towards someone familiar with the mining area, someone comfortable moving between town and the edge of industrial land after dark. Meanwhile, officers searched both directions from the fork. One road led to Fenghuang village. Residents there reported no unusual visitors that night. No woman walking alone, no red scarf passing through. The other direction led toward the abandoned coal mining structures, a place of partial vacancy, old dormitories, management quarters, storage rooms left to decay. During the day, workers still passed through parts of it. At night, the area thinned into silence. The geography itself began to matter. Isolation is not just physical distance. It is the absence of witnesses, and whoever met her that night knew the terrain. At this stage, investigators did not yet have blood evidence. They did not yet have a confirmed crime scene. They had only a convergence of movements: a red scarf, a motorcycle, a forked road, and a mining compound that offered privacy. Suspicion no longer floated across multiple directions. It was beginning to narrow. But narrowing suspicion is not proof. And in cases like this, proof often hides where familiarity feels safest. Because statistically, disappearances involving no sign of forced entry, no ransom demand, and no public struggle tend to resolve in one direction. Not strangers, not random violence, but someone within reach. Someone who answered or made those last calls. And somewhere between town lights and coal dust, the circle of suspicion was tightening around a figure investigators had not yet publicly named. The motorcycle rider was no longer an unknown shape in the fog. He was becoming the center of the investigation. By the time investigators shifted their full attention toward the mining area, the case had already evolved in silence. There was still no official declaration of homicide, no recovered body, but experienced detectives recognize a pattern when absence becomes too precise. The fork in the road was not random. The motorcycle sighting was not coincidence. And the coal compound was not just geography, it was controlled space. 2 search teams were deployed simultaneously. One canvassed Fenghuang village again, confirming no sightings of Kui Mai that night. Doors were knocked on, shopkeepers questioned, outdoor cameras, sparse and low resolution, reviewed, nothing. The other team moved toward the older section of the coal mining complex. In daylight, the place looked tired rather than threatening. Faded paint, concrete dust, rows of low dormitory-style housing once used by workers, a management building slightly more intact, positioned opposite an abandoned structure with broken windows and exposed brick. It was not a place people visited casually after dark. While interviewing workers, one officer heard a detail that at first seemed minor. About 10 days earlier, shortly after Kui Mai disappeared, one of the mine managers had washed his bedding thoroughly. That alone was not suspicious, but the worker remembered something else. It had been a cloudy, cold day. No sunlight, no practical reason to wash large items that would struggle to dry. Coal regions are practical environments. People wash bedding when it is needed or when something requires cleaning. The name attached to that room: Song and Hui, mine manager, known to the victim, contacted her in the hours before her phone signal ended. The investigation did not escalate publicly. It tightened quietly. A search warrant was obtained for Song's living quarters. When officers entered his room, everything appeared orderly. The bed was made neatly, the floor swept, no obvious disturbance, no visible stains. But crimes rarely leave dramatic evidence in plain sight. They leave fragments. Investigators began systematically removing layers. Sheets first, then mattress, then checking under the bed frame. Nothing visible. Then as an officer lifted the mattress slightly, something small slipped free and fell against the wooden slats beneath. A SIM card. It was placed into a testing device. The number registered. It matched Kui Mei's phone. There are moments in investigations when uncertainty collapses instantly into direction. This was one of them. If her phone had gone silent after 8:00 p.m. and her SIM card was now under the mattress of a man who claimed he never saw her that night, the narrative shifted from possibility to concealment. But that was only half the turn. Across from the management building stood the abandoned structure, the one with broken windows and flaking plaster. Officers re-entered it with forensic technicians. Inside, dust coated the floor unevenly. Footprints overlapped from previous days. The air smelled stale. Then someone noticed it, a dark, dried discoloration along one interior wall. At first glance, it blended with dirt, but under closer inspection, the pattern spread outward irregularly, not dripping, not splashed wildly, but transferred. Presumptive testing confirmed it was blood. Samples were collected. Near the base of the wall, partially covered in ash and debris, investigators found fragments of burned fabric. One piece retained color, red. The fragment was small, no larger than a palm, but the fabric texture was consistent with wool blend scarf material. Forensic analysis would later confirm the blood matched Kui Mei's DNA profile. The red scarf seen at the fork in the road had not vanished into air. It had burned incompletely in a building across from a mine manager's room. The physical map now connected. 2 calls from Song Anhui shortly before 1 p.m. Witness sees Kui Mei mount a motorcycle near 9:00 p.m. Fork in the road leading toward mining area. Bedding wash days later. SIM card hidden beneath mattress. Blood in abandoned building. Burned red fabric. Evidence does not shout. It accumulates. When investigators brought Song Anhui in for a second interview, the tone shifted noticeably. He maintained his earlier statement. He had attended a gathering that evening. He had been drinking. He returned to his room and slept. When asked about the SIM card, he paused, then suggested someone might have placed it there. When confronted with the blood evidence, he questioned the source. Calm, controlled, but slower now. The most telling aspect of concealment is often not panic. It is calculation. Removing a SIM card disables traceability. Burning clothing reduces identification. Washing bedding eliminates transfer evidence. These are not actions performed in shock alone. They are actions performed in aftermath. While interrogation continued, a separate search team focused on disturbed soil behind the abandoned building. The ground was uneven, not freshly dug in an obvious way, but subtly inconsistent with surrounding terrain. In cold November earth, disturbance holds shape differently. The first shovel entered quietly. Each subsequent movement carried a weight beyond procedure. When investigators transition from searching for a missing person to excavating soil, the emotional atmosphere changes. The goal is no longer rescue, it is recovery. Hours later, beneath a shallow layer of earth, they found what they feared. Kui Mei's body. The red scarf had not protected her from the cold. It had only marked the path toward truth. By that evening, the case was no longer theoretical. It was no longer built on phone logs and witness recollections. It was anchored in physical evidence. And every piece of that evidence pointed in one direction. The mine manager who once helped her family secure employment. The man who had called her twice before her signal went dark. The man whose room concealed her SIM card. The man who washed his bedding on a day without sun. The circle of suspicion had closed. What remained was not whether a crime occurred, but why, and whether the truth would come voluntarily or have to be forced into light. By the time Song Anhui sat down for the third interrogation, the room felt smaller, not physically. Structurally, it was the same square space, metal table, 2 chairs, 1 camera in the upper corner. But the weight of evidence changes air pressure. It shifts posture, it alters breathing patterns. This time, detectives did not begin broadly. They began with sequence. 2 phone calls at 7:58 p.m. and 8:03 p.m. Witness sighting near 9 p.m. Motorcycle, mining compound, SIM card under mattress, blood in abandoned structure, DNA confirmation. They laid it out chronologically, not emotionally. When evidence forms a straight line, denial becomes fragile. At first, Song repeated what he had already said. He had been drinking with workers. He returned to his room. He slept. He did not see her that night. The investigators did not interrupt. Then they placed the SIM card on the table between them. He looked at it longer than before. Silence is often more revealing than contradiction. They followed with forensic photographs. Not graphic, but clinical. The dried blood pattern, the burned red fabric fragment, soil disturbance behind the building. He asked for water. It was the first crack. Psychological interrogation is rarely about aggression. It is about inevitability. When a suspect understands that the timeline is airtight, confession becomes less about surrender and more about narrative control. After several hours, his posture changed. Shoulders lowered, eye contact diminished. He began speaking, not in defiance, but in explanation. Yes, he had called her that evening. Yes, they had agreed to meet after her shift. Their relationship had existed for some time. It had not been public, but it had not been purely transactional either. In coal towns, alliances form in quiet corridors, between offices, dormitories, borrowed rooms. He had helped her family secure work in the past. That history created closeness, gratitude, and eventually something more complicated. But according to his statement, she wanted to end it. She had distanced herself in recent weeks, reduced calls, avoided visits. He sensed withdrawal. That night, when she mounted the back of his motorcycle, he believed they were meeting to talk. They rode toward the mining compound, a place he controlled, a place without interruption. Inside his room, the conversation shifted quickly. She told him it was over. She did not want further contact. She did not want risk. He described feeling cornered, not physically, but socially. If she exposed the relationship, his position at the mine could collapse. His family could face humiliation. In tightly structured industrial communities, reputation is currency. Rejection combined with fear of exposure creates volatile psychological pressure. He admitted the argument escalated, voices raised, accusations exchanged. She stood to leave. He grabbed her arm. He said it was not planned. He said he did not intend for it to go that far. But in emotionally charged confrontations, the line between restraint and force can disappear within seconds. He pushed. She fell. He panicked. According to his confession, he attempted to silence her when she struggled. The room, once private, suddenly felt dangerous. Any noise could carry. He claimed he did not realize the severity until she stopped moving. Whether that moment was seconds or minutes long is something only he will ever know. But what followed was not panic. It was calculation. He removed the SIM card from her phone to prevent location tracing. He carried her body across to the abandoned structure under cover of darkness. The mining compound's layout allowed movement without drawing attention. Inside the empty building, he attempted to destroy evidence, burning the red scarf. The flame did not fully consume it. He buried her behind the structure in shallow soil. The next day, he washed his bedding thoroughly. Despite the weather, despite the impracticality, he believed water would erase what had occurred. Concealment is a second decision, and second decisions are rarely impulsive. When he finished speaking, there was no dramatic breakdown, no collapse into tears, just exhaustion. Detectives documented every word carefully. The case had transitioned from disappearance to homicide, but the most disturbing element was not the physical act. It was the emotional progression, control, attachment, fear of rejection, fear of exposure, loss of status, escalation, silencing, concealment. Nothing in the preceding weeks suggested public conflict. No threats were reported, no violence previously documented, which raises a difficult question. How many emotionally unstable dynamics exist quietly until the moment one person attempts to leave? In structured communities like mining towns, power is subtle. It is tied to employment, hierarchy, and reputation. A mine manager does not only control machinery schedules, he controls livelihoods. When personal relationships overlap with professional authority, the psychological imbalance deepens. Shui Maya may have believed she could end one chapter of her life and continue the others. Song Eun-hui believed that chapter ending would destroy everything he had built. The difference between those beliefs unfolded in a single room. By the time the confession concluded, dawn was beginning to lighten the hills outside the station. The red scarf was no longer just an image in fog. It was evidence logged, photographed, and tagged. And the man who once helped her family secure work now faced charges that would dismantle his own life entirely. The motive was not greed. It was not robbery. It was not stranger violence. It was something quieter and more common, a refusal to accept loss, and the belief that erasing a person could erase consequence. Part 6 would move from interrogation room to courtroom, but psychologically the unraveling had already occurred the moment control turned into fear. By the time the case reached trial, winter had already settled fully over Yangcheng County. Coal towns do not pause for tragedy. Mines continue operating. Workers change shifts. Smoke continues rising from low chimneys. But beneath routine, memory lingers, especially when the crime does not involve strangers, but familiar faces. The courtroom was modest in size. No national media presence, no spectacle, just local residents, court officials, family members, and a man who once held managerial authority in a mining compound now standing as a defendant. Song Eun-hui did not appear outwardly volatile. Observers later described him as subdued, controlled, almost detached. But detachment inside a courtroom is often less about indifference and more about psychological exhaustion. The prosecution reconstructed the timeline carefully. 2 calls placed shortly before 8 p.m., a meeting arranged, a motorcycle ride toward the mining compound, an argument inside a private room, physical force, removal of the SIM card, movement of the body, attempted burning of the red scarf, shallow burial behind an abandoned building, washing of bedding on a sunless day. They emphasize not only the act itself, but the sequence that followed it. In criminal proceedings, courts often differentiate between impulsive violence and deliberate concealment. The moment of escalation may occur in seconds, but the decisions afterward reveal state of mind. The defense did not dispute the confession. Instead, they focused on emotional volatility, alcohol consumption, a sudden argument, loss of control triggered by rejection. They argued it was not premeditated, but premeditation is not always required for severe sentencing. The concealment efforts weighed heavily. Removing the SIM card indicated awareness of traceability. Burning the scarf indicated awareness of identifiable property. Burying the body indicated awareness of permanence. These were not actions of someone unaware of consequence. Quimea's family sat quietly throughout the proceedings. There were no dramatic interruptions, no visible outbursts. In many rural communities, grief expresses itself in restraint. For them, the complexity of her life, the relationships, the secrecy, the parallel roles, did not diminish the loss. When the verdict was delivered, the courtroom fell into a silence deeper than any raised voice could have created. Song Eun-hui was convicted of intentional homicide, with aggravating circumstances due to concealment of the body. The sentence reflected the severity of the act. There was no applause, no visible satisfaction. Justice in such cases rarely feels victorious. It feels final. Outside the courthouse, life resumed in the predictable rhythm of a coal town winter. Trucks passed, dust rose, the mining compound stood unchanged, except for the knowledge now attached to it. The abandoned building was sealed, the soil behind it leveled, but certain images do not disappear with restoration. A red scarf against gray fog, a motorcycle idling at night, a fork in the road. The case officially closed with conviction. Yet questions linger beyond legal resolution. Was it truly a moment of sudden emotional collapse? Or had fear been building quietly beneath the surface for weeks? Did she believe she could exit the relationship safely? Did he believe exposure would destroy him entirely? In many homicide cases, the violence itself occupies the center of attention. But in this one, the more instructive pattern lies in escalation, emotional dependency, power imbalance, fear of reputational collapse. an inability to accept rejection. Coal mining communities are structured around hierarchy and survival. Positions matter, reputation matters, stability matters. When personal entanglements intersect with authority, the psychological stakes multiply. Quimie lived multiple lives: provider, partner, lover, negotiator of her own future. Song Hui feared losing control over his. And somewhere between those two trajectories, a private confrontation turned irreversible. The red scarf became the case's quiet symbol, not of violence, but of visibility. It was seen clearly that night, then it vanished, only to reappear as the fragment that revealed everything. When people disappear, the public often imagines distant threats, but more often than not, the danger stands much closer. Inside conversations, inside expectations, inside rooms believed to be safe. The court delivered its sentence. The file was archived. But in Yangcheng County, when fog settles low over the roads near the old mine, some residents still remember the woman who stepped off a motorcycle into the cold, and the choice, made in a single room, that ensured she would never step back out again.